Hare Krishna devotees, welcome to our chapter 4 session where we did a couple of shlokas last night, which is shlokas 36 and 37. And just a quick recap of what we discussed last night. In shloka 36, the Lord uses the metaphor of a boat that even if you are the worst of the sinners, the Lord says, this boat, what is this boat? This boat is this transcendental knowledge. If you get into that boat of transcendental knowledge, then Krishna says you will be easily able to cross over the ocean of miseries. So that was the first metaphor. And essentially, when we practice Bhakti Yoga, we have already boarded this boat of transcendental knowledge. And in due course of time, this boat will take us back to Sri Krishna's abode. If you're not on the boat, then it'll be very difficult for us to handle those waves in the ocean. The waves comprising of birth, disease, old age, and death. We also talked about the fact that when we board this boat of transcendental knowledge, then Lord Krishna takes care of everything that is beyond our control, because there are only two things that can make a boat sink. One is the boatman is not experienced enough and therefore may make mistakes, or because there are factors beyond his control like weather and other things. But when we board this boat of transcendental knowledge, the only thing we have to worry about is not to commit mistakes on this path of sadhana bhakti. Everything else is taken care of by the Lord. All of the unforeseen, potentially unforeseen circumstances, things beyond our control, etc. All of that is taken care of by Lord Krishna. The only thing that is expected of us is that we should not be careless in the practice of bhakti. The other aspect is that if we get onto this boat of transcendental knowledge, at some point we get off the boat, we can always reboard the boat at any point in time. So even though we are sinners, the Lord is so gracious and merciful that He allows us to board the boat in spite of our being disobedient to Him repeatedly. So the Lord's door is always open. It's just from our side, we have to unlock the door to reach Him. So that was shloka number 36. Excuse me. Shloka number 37. The Lord uses the second metaphor of a fire, and not just any fire, a blazing fire. Just like a blazing fire can burn the firewood to ashes, which means what was originally a firewood doesn't exist anymore. Its shape cannot be recognized. We don't even know what it was before. It's just ashes. So Krishna says, just like that, this transcendental knowledge is also like that blazing fire. And what does it burn to ashes? It burns to ashes all of our past karmic reactions. So this karmic activities that we've done in the past, for which we have accumulated not just punya, but also papa, you could think of them as a huge heap of firewood that we've accumulated over many, many lifetimes of birth. And this transcendental knowledge can simply burn all of that karmic reactions away. And in this context, we talked about karma in a little bit more detail, right? The question is, if I did something 25 lifetimes ago, why is there such a delay in punishment? Is that really fair? Why not punish me immediately after I've done something? That's because different seeds fructify at different rates. So if we drink alcohol one day, all other things being equal, we're not going to get liver cirrhosis the next day. That will be immediate punishment. If that were the case, all of us would be very, very good human beings. Maybe. I don't know. I'm thinking, hopefully. But if you keep drinking alcohol every day, thinking nothing is happening to your body, so why not risk it? And later on in life, 20 years, 25 years down the road, you may have to suffer the consequences of your accumulated actions of drinking alcohol. So similarly, different activities fructify at different speed. But no matter what it is, every seed that we have sown will fructify. So the Lord decides what reaction has to be given at what time and under what conditions. So therefore, sometimes the reactions come in one lifetime, sometimes in the next, sometimes in the distant future. So just the thought of thinking about paying for something that we did way in the past, sometime way into the future, itself is a frightening proposition. Why? Because in our current life, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know when we will suffer the consequences of what we've done in our current life. And now we have to worry about some previous life. We've done something. It's quite a scary proposition. Right? And in that context, we talked about 3 words: avidya, bijam, and papam. That avidya is actually the root cause of all of our suffering. Avidya means ignorance. Ignorance of our constitutional position, that we are meant to serve Krishna and our real enjoyment comes from serving Krishna. It is because of this avidya, this ignorance, this false identity, that I am the enjoyer and I am the sole enjoyer, then that results in so many desires to be separate from Krishna. So the primary cause of our suffering is avidya, and the secondary cause of our suffering is our material desires. So these desires are considered like seeds waiting to be planted. When we plant those seeds, especially those seeds that violate Vedic scriptures, then we suffer the consequences in the form of sinful reactions called papam. So avidya leads to bijam, which is material desires. This bijam causes us to act, and those actions causes us to accumulate sinful activities. So this, what we're experiencing in this life is actually prarabdha karma, which means the fruit has already been matured, and that's what we're experiencing. What we are yet to experience is called aprarabdha karma. The effect is not there. It's coming. It's just not visible to you. This bijam, this desire is ready to be, that seed is just ready to be sown. Because that desire is already there in you. So if we are suffering today, it's because of our prarabdha karma. And if we suffer in the future, in a future life, it's because of that aprarabdha karma, which will become prarabdha karma at some point in the future life. But Krishna gives us a wonderful solution to all of this convoluted karmic reactions. Very simple. We just have to take shelter of Krishna. And Krishna says devotion to Krishna is so powerful that it burns up not just the aprarabdha karma, it can also change your destiny in your current life. It can change your prarabdha karma also. So Krishna is giving us assurance in these two shlokas. If at all we approach him, he will reciprocate with us. He will reciprocate with us by helping us cross that ocean of misery. He will reciprocate with us by burning up all of our past sinful karmic reactions. So the root cause of all of our suffering is actually the Jivatsma's separation from the Lord. So all we have to do is reconnect with the Supreme Lord. And when we reconnect with the Supreme Lord and establish our relationship with him, that's when Krishna takes over. So that brings us to today's shloka, which is shloka number 38. So I will recite the shloka. You can recite after me. Nahi jnanena sadrisham
Nahi jnanena sadrisham
pavitramiham vidyate
pavitram vidyate
tatsvayam yoga samsiddhah
tatsvayam
yoga samsiddhah
kalenatmani vindati
kalenatmani vindati
nahi jnanena sadrisham
nahi jnanena sadrisham
pavitramiha vidyate
pavitram iha vidyate
tatsvayam yoga samsiddhah
tatsvayam yoga samsiddhah
kalenatmani vindati
kalenatmani vindati
nahi jnanena sadrisham
nahi jnanena sadrisham
pavitramiha vidyate
pavitram iha vidyate
tatsvayam yoga samsiddhah
tatsvayam yoga samsiddhah
kalenatmani vindati.
kalenatmani vindati.
Word for word meaning and translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Na, nothing.
Nothing.
He,
He
certainly.
certainly
Jnanena,
jnanena
with knowledge.
with knowledge
Sadrisham,
sadrisham
in comparison.
in comparison
Pavitram,
pavitram
sanctified.
sanctified
Iha,
iha
in this world.
in this world
Vidyate,
vidyate
exists.
exists
Tat,
tat
that.
that
Swayam,
swayam
himself.
himself
Yoga,
yoga
in devotion.
in devotion.
Samsiddhaha,
Samsiddhaha,
he who is mature,
he who is mature,
kalena,
Kalena,
in course of time,
in course of time,
Atmani,
Atmani,
in himself,
in himself,
Vindati,
Vindati,
enjoys.
enjoys.
Translation. In this world,
In this world,
there is nothing so sublime and pure
there is nothing so sublime and pure
as transcendental knowledge.
as transcendental knowledge.
Such knowledge
Such knowledge
is the mature fruit
is the mature fruit
of all mysticism,
of all mysticism,
and one who has become accomplished
and one who has become accomplished
in the practice of devotional service
The
in the practice of devotional service,
enjoys this knowledge within himself
enjoys this knowledge within himself
in due course of time.
in due course of time.
So Krishna has talked about how this transcendental knowledge can protect you, guide you, and ultimately deliver you to him. So in the concluding shlokas of this chapter, the Lord is glorifying transcendental knowledge itself as something that is sublime and pure. And this transcendental knowledge. So remember, in the beginning of this chapter, transcendental knowledge has been defined by Lord Krishna as the topmost of the spiritual science. It's the science of the soul's relationship with the super soul. So Krishna is saying this knowledge is the mature fruit of all transcendentalism, is to come to this conclusion, this understanding that you as the Jivatma are meant to serve the Supreme Lord. That is your relationship. Once you know that you are a servant, the only thing left to do is offer services. Servant means to serve. The minute you know your position as a servant, you should start serving. How do you start serving? By practicing devotional service. And as you do this, you will begin to enjoy this knowledge of the Supreme Lord. You will be comfortable with the fact that you are just a servant. And at the same time, through the process of bhakti, you will actually enjoy this entire process. So you don't have to wait to go to Vaikuntha or Golok Vrindavan to enjoy yourself. You can enjoy yourself here. So we've been traversing the path from how to get from illusion to illumination. So we've discovered that the root cause of our bondage to birth and death, old age and disease is avidya or ignorance. The opposite of ignorance is being in full knowledge, and knowledge can liberate you. And Prabhupada writes that this knowledge is actually the mature fruit of devotional service. And once you have begun to practice devotional service, one of the benefits of practicing devotional service is simply peace of mind. So you don't have to search for peace anymore. That peace is within you in the form of service to the Supreme Lord Krishna. So you feel comfortable, you feel confident, you feel protected. You feel like you're making progress when you achieve this level of peace. So in other words, Prabhupada writes, this knowledge and peace culminate in Krishna consciousness. And Prabhupada writes also, that is the last word in the Bhagavad Gita. The last word in the Bhagavad Gita is that all of us have to become Krishna conscious. To always remember Krishna and to never forget Krishna. But we keep using the word knowledge, knowledge, knowledge. There is a difference between information and knowledge. So we have to draw the distinction between just accumulating information and gaining knowledge through practical and personal realizations. So pure knowledge has the power to purify one. It has the power to elevate your consciousness. When your consciousness is elevated, you feel liberated. When you feel liberated, you feel peace of mind. And ultimately, you want to go back to that one person who will never let you down. And that's the Supreme Lord. That one person who's been patiently waiting for you, lifetime after lifetime, for you to come back to him. So how do you get this theoretical information? You get it by reading and listening to your guru. But then just reading and listening is not sufficient for us to make progress. So we heard from, in one of the videos that we were watching last week, one of the shorts that we watched is His Holiness Kanana Swami Maharaj said, you know, what's the point of memorizing the entire cookbook? It's a wonderful skill to have. But if you've never once cooked any one of the items, even one of the recipes, you can't call yourself a cook. So you can memorize the cookbook, but that doesn't make you a cook. Furthermore, memorizing the cookbook will not eliminate your hunger and thirst. Therefore, memorizing verses, memorizing scriptures, just accumulating all of this information is by itself not going to be helpful for us. So we actually have to put this into practice. So we may know theoretically that body is different from soul. We may know that we are all servants of God. But that knowledge by itself doesn't make you a God-realized person. So what actually makes you progress? You have to put it in practice. Whatever Krishna is saying in the Bhagavad Gita, it's actually very action-oriented. He is expecting you to implement it in your life. When he says, always think of me and never forget me, he expects you to implement it in your life. If you don't implement it, where are you going to get the experience from? So whatever you have learned from Guru, Sadhu, Shastra has to be implemented, because when you implement it, your mind is getting purified. And this, Krishna says, ultimately leads to realization of self and finally to realization of the Supreme Lord. So it is this knowledge, this realized knowledge through the practice of sadhana is what Krishna is glorifying in this verse as pure and sublime. So you cannot experience the purity and sublimity of this transcendental knowledge unless you are actually a sincere sadhaka. So, but most of us think, okay, this knowledge is all very good, but is it really the right time? When I'm inspired, I will do it one day. Or worse, suddenly a tragic event happens in your life and suddenly you are searching for answers. But this transformation begins with a very single step that you take. So if transformation begins with a single step, why wait till the last breath to transform yourself? Why wait till old age to do it? Why not begin now? So this verse is simply guaranteeing us that if we faithfully apply this transcendental knowledge in our lives, just one day at a time, taking small baby steps, nobody can become self-realized in one day. It's a journey. So if we take that first step, then gradually it will lead to inner happiness in due course of time. I was reading the senior Vaishnava's thoughts on this particular verse, his writings on this particular verse. And he was stating in his writing that different flowers blossom at different rates, and that's dictated by nature. So some flowers may bloom only once in their entire life, and after that, they will never bloom again. They will never produce flowers again. Similarly, spiritual progress also happens at the rate that is dictated by Lord Krishna's mercy. So each one of us will bloom at our own pace. But that does not mean we should be satisfied with slow progress. We should do our utmost to stick to our end of the bargain. But at the same time, we need to be patient as we practice Bhakti Yoga, because not everything is going to be revealed to you in one fell swoop. So for us in Bhakti Yoga, it's not success that is important. It is progress that is more important. Because our definition of success can keep changing. But nevertheless, as we take these small steps, progress will be made, and that is what is most important. So even if we are struggling with our sadhana, if we are struggling with our chanting, if we are struggling with getting up early in the morning, if we are struggling attending classes, if we are struggling taking up seva in the temple, it does not matter. We are making progress. We should not give up. Thinking that impediments are coming our way, and maybe, just maybe, Krishna is saying, drop it, it's not for you. I don't think so. Krishna is just seeing how much you want him. Are you really desperate for him or not? If you're desperate for him, show him that you're desperate for him. Then he'll begin to reciprocate with you. So that takes us to the next shloka. Again, to review, in shloka 38, the Lord is saying that this transcendental knowledge is sublime and pure. And you can taste this when you perform Bhakti Yoga. And you will taste the results of peace and bliss over a period of time. It may not happen right away. It may not happen at the pace that you want it to happen, but it will happen. So we have to understand that each of us is going through a journey, and each of us are moving at our own pace. And to repeat, we should not be satisfied with the pace that we are moving at, but at the same time, we should not be frustrated by it either. So coming to the 39th shloka. So to please recite after me. Shraddhavan labhate jnanam.
Shraddhavan jnanam.
Tatparasanyatendriyah.
Tatparasanyatendriyah.
Jnanam labdhva param shantim.
Jnanam labdhva param shantim.
Achirenadhigacchati.
Achirenadhigacchati.
Shraddhavan labhate jnanam.
Shraddhavan labhate jnanam.
Tatparasanyatendriyah.
Tatparasanyatendriyah.
Jnanam labdhva param shantim.
Jnanam labdhva param shantim.
Achirenadhigacchati.
Achirenadhigacchati.
Shraddhavan labhate jnanam.
Shraddhavan labhate jnanam.
Parasanyatendriyah Jnanam labdhva param shantim achirena dhigacchati. Word for word meaning and translation by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Shraddhavan, a faithful man. Labhate, achieves. Jnanam, knowledge. Tatparaha, very much attached to it. Samyata, controlled. Indriyaha, senses. Jnanam, knowledge. Labdhva, having achieved. Param, transcendental. Shantim, peace. Achirena, very soon. Adhigacchati, attains. Translation: a faithful man who is dedicated to transcendental knowledge and who subdues his senses is eligible to achieve such knowledge. And having achieved it, he quickly attains the supreme spiritual peace. So after the Lord has glorified this transcendental knowledge, he's now going to come to two verses. In this verse, he's going to talk about those who have faith. And in verse number 40, he's going to talk about those who don't have faith. So he's going to contrast two different personalities and their approach to faith and knowledge about the sublime, about the spiritual. So if one has faith in this knowledge, then such a person, Krishna says, is dedicated to making progress on this path. And as he makes progress, what happens? He is able to control his senses in order to make further progress in achieving more of this knowledge through realization, through sadhana. And as he gains more and more realized knowledge, then he achieves that supreme spiritual peace. So let's dissect the shloka a little bit. So essentially, the Lord is saying, faith, it's only faith that can grant you access to this transcendental knowledge. Without faith, you cannot even approach it. So Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport that such knowledge and Krishna consciousness can be achieved by a faithful person who believes firmly in Krishna. And Prabhupada says, one is called a faithful man who thinks that simply by acting in Krishna consciousness, he can attain the highest perfection. Which means somewhere you have to have that belief that since the acharyas have said that this process works, you're ready to give it a shot. Simply based on the faith that this process will work. This faith is attained by the discharge of devotional service and by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, which cleanses one's heart of all material dirt. So over and above this, Prabhupada says one should control the senses. Faith is good, but without sadhana, you cannot control your senses. So a person who is faithful to Krishna and who controls the senses can easily attain perfection in knowledge of Krishna consciousness without delay. So let's explore what is faith, what is Shraddha. The Lord uses the word Shraddha many times in the Bhagavad Gita. So sometimes when we come across scripture, or even if we are reading shlokas in the Bhagavad Gita, or in the Srimad Bhagavatam, or if we are reading the commentary of great acharyas, including the commentaries of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, we may not be able to comprehend. Or rather, sometimes we comprehend it in the wrong way, and we end up finding fault with this knowledge. Faith means you have the humility to acknowledge that today I don't understand this, but if I continue to follow the instructions of my spiritual master, the truth will be revealed to me in the future. That is faith. So this humble attitude that one cannot know everything that we want to know about, either on demand or on command. But if we're patient for the deeper truths to be revealed, that is actually faith. Knowing that you cannot know everything at once. Certain things are going to be revealed to you as long as you're following the process. So faith plus bhakti, or devotional service and humility, will actually lead you to Krishna Prema. So faith plus service. Service and humility, understanding your position as a servant. This will actually give you Krishna Prema. So what is this role of faith and spirituality? So when we realize that because of my limited knowledge and because of my limited intelligence and because of my limited personal realizations, I may not be able to accept what the scriptures reveal. But faith helps you accept the fact that you cannot understand it because you have limited capacity at that point of time to understand it. So Shripadadi Shankaracharya has defined faith as follows. Guru Vedanta Vakyeshu Dhrido Vishwasaha Shraddha. Faith means firm confidence in the words of the Guru and the scriptures. So faith in a bona fide Guru can actually lead you to the Lord. But the same faith, if it's placed in the wrong person, it can completely lead you astray. Therefore, blind faith is never encouraged in our scriptures. So what do? How do you know whether your faith is on a valid foundation or it's based on just willy-nilly accepting something somebody says? So before placing faith on any guru, we must assess whether this guru is teaching as per the Vedic scriptures about the supreme absolute truth. If the guru is not constantly referencing the scriptures when he or she preaches, then they are doing you a big disservice because they are really not connecting you to Krishna. So once, this is the only test. I remember I think Vinit Prabhu had asked this question in the class that we had on Guru Tattva in the temple. How are we supposed to test the Guru? Because as it is, we don't know anything. We are not supposed to consider ourselves intelligent. The one thing we should look for is constant references to scriptures. I am telling you to do this because it's there in the scripture. So once you have confirmed this, then that should be sufficient enough for you to deepen your faith in Guru. And then by surrendering to Guru, you will eventually surrender to the Supreme Lord under the guidance of Guru. If one cannot surrender to Guru, where is the chance of you surrendering directly to Krishna? So one must learn to practice this surrender, submissive inquiry, and seva. These three things, the three S's that we talked about for Shlokas 4.34. Surrender, submissive inquiry, and seva. These three things, if you do it with faith towards a bona fide Guru, that Guru will take you to Krishna. So, looking at a couple of other scriptures, the Shvetashvatara Upanishad states that the imports of all the Vedic knowledge is revealed within the hearts of those who engage with unflinching faith in devotion toward Guru and God. So the Shastras repeatedly state that you must have faith in Guru, Sadhu, Shastra, and ultimately the Supreme Lord. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says in the Madhya Leela of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Shraddha Shabde Vishwasa Kahe Shrudridha Nishchaya Krishne Bhakti Kaile Sarva Karma Krita Hoya. Shraddha is confident, firm faith. Confident, firm faith that by rendering transcendental loving service to Krishna, one automatically performs all subsidiary activities. Such faith is favorable to the discharge of devotional service. So I was looking at the purport that Srila Prabhupada writes to this particular Shloka number 62 from chapter 22 of the Madhya Leela. And I have just put a clipping of the purport of Srila Prabhupada there. Prabhupada says, firm faith and confidence are called Shraddha. When one engages in the Lord's devotional service, he is to be understood to have performed all his responsibilities in the material world. Just by worshipping Krishna, you have already performed all your duties and responsibilities. There's nothing left for you to do. He has satisfied his forefathers, the ordinary living entities and demigods, and is free from all responsibility, which means when you become a devotee of Krishna, you no longer owe any debts to your forefathers, to the demigods, or to other jivatmas. You are freed of those debts. When you worship Krishna, your debt to the other jivatmas, including the demigods, is wiped clean. Such a person does not need to meet his responsibilities separately. It is automatically done. Which means when you satisfy the Supreme Lord, you automatically satisfy the demigods, you satisfy your ancestors, and you satisfy the other jivatmas. You don't have to separately and independently try to satisfy the demigods, your ancestors, and other jivatmas. Simply by performing bhakti yoga, you have fulfilled all your obligations. You don't have debts anymore. So this unflinching faith and devotion in Guru and Krishna, there is a wonderful pastime. Some of you may have already heard this pastime. So Shripad Adi Shankaracharya had a very well-known disciple called Totakacharya, who composed the very famous Totakashtakam. But interestingly, of the 4 primary disciples of Shankaracharya, this Totakacharya was considered to be not very intelligent. But how did he attain divine knowledge? By the grace of his guru. So this Totakacharya, his karmi name was Giri. So of the 4, one day Adi Shankaracharya accepted him as his disciple. Now this disciple Giri, when Shripad Shankaracharya would give lectures, he couldn't understand anything. But there is one thing that never changed about Giri. No matter the fact that he didn't understand, he was listening attentively. He had faith in the words of his master, spiritual master. But he didn't understand the intricacies of what was being taught by his guru, Shankaracharya. So one day, this Giri goes to wash the clothes of his spiritual master in the river. And meanwhile, Adi Shankaracharya is ready to start his class. The other 3 disciples are ready, waiting to listen. And Adi Shankaracharya decides that he will wait for his disciple Giri to come back before he starts the class. At that time, the other 3 disciples tell Shripad Shankaracharya, why do you want to wait for Giri? Anyway, he doesn't understand anything. It's like talking to a wall. When Shankaracharya hears this, through his divine potency, he transmits all transcendental knowledge to Giri, who is on the banks of the river washing his clothes. And he calls out to him loudly saying, come. And when this knowledge is transmitted directly from Guru to Shishya, it's at that time this disciple Giri composes the Totastakam, glorifying his Guru. You can search for Totastakam. You will find a video by Sri Kuldeep Pai, one of his young disciples, students, sings this Totakashtakam. Very beautiful verses, very nicely sung, set to beautiful tune. So this humble Giri, who didn't consider himself to be intelligent, nor did the other disciples consider him to be intelligent, went on to become the great Totakacharya. And why did Shripad Shankaracharya transmit this knowledge to his disciple? Is to correct the pride of the other 3 disciples. So it's because Totakacharya had faith in his guru, even though he did not understand everything that his guru was teaching. Guru himself transmits that knowledge, reveals that knowledge. So in Sloka number 54 of the 11th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport, for the beginners in devotional service to the Lord, temple worship is essential. Temple worship means deity worship, going to the temple and worshipping the deities by, as a congregation is important. And this is confirmed in the Vedic literature, and Prabhupada quotes the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, Yasya deve para bhaktir yata deve tata guru tasyaite katita hi hyartha prakashante mahatmanaha. Only unto those great souls who have implicit faith in both the Lord and the spiritual master are all the imports of Vedic knowledge automatically revealed. So if the Guru says, come to the temple and worship the Lord in the mood of the congregation doing kirtan while the Lord is being worshipped, then devotional service begins with that act of worship. But then that person must have implicit faith both in the Supreme Lord and the spiritual master. Only then will the knowledge actually be revealed. So those three disciples of Sripad Shankaracharya who were brilliant, but they didn't have realized knowledge. They had book knowledge. In contrast to Giri or Totakacharya. So Prabhupada writes that one who has unflinching devotion for the Supreme Lord and is directed by the spiritual master in whom he has similar unflinching faith can see the Supreme Personality of Godhead by revelation. So our personal realizations may not be sufficient for us to understand who is Guru and who is Krishna. But at the right time, we will have those revelations from scriptures that will help us understand the position of Guru and Krishna. Prabhupada writes, one cannot understand Krishna by mental speculation. For one who does not take personal training under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master, it is impossible to even begin to understand Krishna. So the role of the spiritual master is cemented in this one sentence of Srila Prabhupada. For one who does not take personal training under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master, it is impossible to even begin to understand Krishna. The word tu is actually not in this reference to the Shvetashvatara Upanishad. It's actually the Sloka, 54th Sloka of chapter 11, where there is the word tu. So Prabhupada is referencing that. The word tu is specifically used here to indicate that no other process can be used, can be recommended, or can be successful in understanding Krishna, which means accepting a guru is a necessity. It's a precursor to going back to Krishna. Of course, there will always be exceptions. Yes. So let us see, what is the time? It's 5 minutes to 9. So we'll quickly cover the 40th shloka, because here the Lord is contrasting those who don't have faith. Please recite after me. Agnyascha shraddhadhanascha
Agnyascha shraddhadhanascha
samshayatma vinashyati
samshayatma vinashyati
nayam lokosti na paro
yam lokostina paro
na sukham samshayatmanah
na sukham samshayatmanah
agnyascha shraddhadhanascha
agnyascha shraddhadhanascha
samshayatma vinashyati
samshayatma vinashyati
nayam lokosti na paro
nayam lokostina paro
na sukham samshayatmanah
sukham samshayatmanah
agnyascha shraddhadhanascha
agnyascha shraddhadhanascha
samshayatma vinashyati
Shayatma vinashyati.
Nayam lokosti na paro.
Nayam lokosti na paro.
Na sukham samshayatmanaha.
Na sukham samshayatmanaha.
Word for word meaning and translation by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Agnaha,
Agyaha.
a fool who has no knowledge in standard scriptures.
A fool who has no knowledge in standard scriptures.
Cha and
And
ashraddhadhanaha,
Ashraddhadana,
without faith in the revealed scriptures.
without faith in revealed scriptures.
Cha
Also,
also
Samshaya.
samshaya of doubts.
of doubts.
Atma,
Atma,
Atma.
a person.
a person.
Vinashyati,
Vinashyati,
falls back.
falls back.
Na,
No,
never.
never.
I am
I am
in this
in this
lokaha,
Sloka
world.
world.
Asti,
Asti,
there is.
there is
Na,
no,
nor.
no,
Paraha,
para,
in the next life.
in the next life.
Na,
No,
not.
not.
Sukham,
Sukham,
happiness.
happiness.
Samshaya,
Samshaya,
doubtful.
doubtful.
Atmanaha,
Atma,
of the person.
of the person.
Translation. But ignorant and faithless persons
But ignorant and faithless persons
who doubt the revealed scriptures
who doubt the revealed scriptures
do not attain God consciousness.
do not attain God consciousness.
They fall down.
They fall down.
For the doubting soul,
For the doubting soul,
there is happiness
there is happiness
neither in this world
neither in this world
nor in the next.
nor in the next.
So let's look at the shloka now. So that means Krishna is saying those who have faith, they make progress. Those who don't, well, it can only lead to despair, misery. So doubting scriptures can only lead to despair. For example, let us say we all go out to eat. We have to have faith that the food that's being served to us is not poisoned. But just in case, every time we order a food, or we order a dish and we have a doubt, wonder if it is poisoned. And therefore we say, let's test it out each time. Only if it passes the test, I will eat it. Then if you do go through this process, what's there to enjoy? There's nothing left for you to enjoy. You'll just waste a lot of time testing things. Same way we trust doctors to identify our disease accurately and treat us. But if you have so much doubt, the patient believes that the doctor is diseased. It's not him. The doctor has it wrong. Of course, in today's age, it's a little bit more difficult to have implicit trust in all healthcare providers because we don't know what drives them, what motivates them. Not everybody's motivation is pure. Not everybody's motivation is service. But at the same time, if we don't have trust in anything around us, life becomes very difficult. So hence the Lord says that men without faith in God and his revealed word, Prabhupada says, find no good in this world, nor in the next. They make no progress as they are consumed with doubts. And you may think, sometimes when I attend a class, people will say, I have a doubt. There is a difference between a doubt and a question. Samshayaha, doubt. Question is prashna. When you say I have a question, sometimes we may interchange the word because we are not articulating well. It's not that one should not have doubts, but let's understand the significance and the difference between the word prashna and the word samshaya. Question, when you have a question, it suggests that you are eager to learn and also that you respect the speaker and know that the speaker is likely to have that answer for you. In contrast, doubt suggests that I suspect the speaker and therefore the subject itself is not worth exploring any further. So that's the difference between having a question and having a doubt. So what happens? Doubt makes us question authority and the validity of everything. Doubts can be helpful because it can stop us from going on the wrong track. It's not that doubts in and of itself is erroneous. Doubts can help you avoid a fake guru. But then, if we're not careful, the doubts can even stop us from going on the right track because too many doubts lead to cynicism. Cynicism means you don't trust anyone and you don't trust anything. For everything you want proof. Only if there is proof, you decide there is faith or there is a belief system. So having doubts can be a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it can help you avoid pitfalls in life. On the other hand, it can paralyze you because you begin to doubt everything and anything simply because you have experienced some. So your past experiences may determine how you view the world. So given that doubts have this negative connotation, the Gita frequently urges us to have no doubts. It constantly encourages you to have faith. Krishna uses the word Shraddha often. So for example, in the 7th Sloka of the 8th chapter, the Lord says, Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mamanusmara yudhyacha mayyarpita mano buddhihi mame vaishyasya samshayah. Therefore, Arjuna, you should always think of me in the form of Krishna and at the same time carry out your prescribed duty of fighting. With your activities dedicated to me and your mind and intelligence fixed on me, you will attain me without doubt, asamshayah. So doubts are like these dangerous demons that need to be slain. The 15th chapter talks about slaying this ignorance with this weapon of detachment. So sometimes your doubts are slain through divine intervention, through divine empowerment. So generally in the Bhagavad Gita, doubt is the opposite of faith. So Shraddha against Samshayah. Krishna is always encouraging to have Shraddha and to have no doubt, asamshaya. As a matter of fact, this particular shloka, and in combination with the previous shloka, which talks about faith, is telling you essentially that if you have faith, it's the launching pad for transcendental knowledge. So the problem with having too many doubts is that it robs you of faith and ultimately it robs you of hope. One cannot live without some hope. One cannot survive. So Krishna is saying, trust me. He is saying, trust me in shloka number 36. He's saying, trust me in shloka number 37. He's saying, trust me in shloka number 38, in 39. And he's also saying, trust me, if you don't have faith, you'll go nowhere, in shloka number 40. So it's all about faith. So we'll conclude with this particular slide today. Faith and knowledge go hand in hand. So the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, written by Srila Rupa Goswami, it talks about 3 types of sadhakas, because we are all sadhakas, so we need to know where we stand in relation to faith and knowledge. So we talk about the Uttama Adhikari, the Madhyama Adhikari, and the Kanishta Adhikari. Uttama Adhikari has firm faith and complete knowledge. Although one cannot have complete knowledge, he is a self-realized soul. He is a God-realized person. So such a person who has firm faith in God and has achieved God realization is called an Uttama Adhikari. So an Uttama Adhikari would be Srila Prabhupada. So who's a Madhyama Adhikari? A Madhyama Adhikari is someone whose faith in Krishna is very firm, but they don't have complete knowledge. They are not God realized. They may not even be self-realized, but they are making advancement. Such a devotee is called a Madhyama Adhikari. In the sense, you are convinced it is Krishna and nothing else, but you don't know all of your knowledge about Krishna is not very firm. If somebody argued with you about Krishna, you will not be able to back it up because your knowledge is a little bit wobbly, but your faith in Krishna is very strong. So such a person is called a Madhyama Adhikari. And the lowest of this is called Kanishta Adhikari, where your faith itself is weak and you have little to no knowledge. And therefore, for those people, it would be nice if you all be on mute, because otherwise suddenly it distracts everybody, including me. So I'm a Kanishta Adhikari. I get shaken up very easily. So if one's faith is very weak and you have little to no knowledge, then you can easily be taken away from Krishna. It just takes a little bit of convincing arguments from somebody who may be an atheist or does not believe in God or who believes in some other God. They can just take you away from Krishna, because both your faith and your knowledge is not firm enough for you to be hooked to Krishna. So Prabhupada says we must all try to become Madhyama Adhikaris. We may not all become Uttama Adhikaris. We may not achieve pure devotion in one lifetime. But definitely we should try to come from Kanishta Adhikari to the Madhyama Adhikari stage. To do that, you have to hear more, you have to chant more, you have to serve more. And then your faith increases. And slowly your knowledge will also increase along with that. So these are the 3 shlokas for today, with shloka number 38. The Lord is talking about the purity and the sublimeness of this transcendental knowledge. In shloka number 39, the Lord is talking about those who have faith. How do they respond to this process? And here in shloka number 40, the Lord is talking about the absolute despair and the miserable condition of those who have no faith in the scriptures, no faith in Krishna. So that leaves us with 2 more shlokas to finish, which we will take up next Saturday.